following is a special presentation of a 3-part series created by Metis youth in the Metis and Me program. A program that allows Metis youth to learn and share what being Metis means to them. Today's episode is a story from Caitlin Turner.
Armstrong wasn't Dawson, and neither was home. Amma stood beside the rusting railroad that trekked deeper into the Ontario woods. It had that overpowering scent only truly old things did, like the abandoned tracks near her parents' house or the decaying shed at the edge of their property that silently succumbed to the decades weighing down its wood. She should feel excited with starting a new chapter of her life, getting answers to so many questions, restoring a piece of herself. But it's the 5th of June, and Amma wishes she was anywhere but here. Specifically, Amma found herself thinking of back in Palgrave with her family, picking raspberries with her sister, filling one of their dad's old worn flannels with so many they'd stain it, eating all the raspberries on the way back home till they got sick. But even if she was back in Palgrave, she knows she'd be staring at the walls of her room, thinking about the what-ifs, the cousins she'd been messaging in Dawson Creek. So here she was, a heavy backpack slung over one shoulder, and an even heavier weight of her anxieties resting against her back, worse than any bag. She couldn't do this. It would be so easy to turn around, wave another car down, and head back home, leave Armstrong behind, forget everything she had planned. Lost in thought and her own self-deprecation, it took the crunching of gravel for Amma to even realize she had company. It appears we're not alone. Amma had spent her fair share of time researching all she could about train hopping. She'd encountered many people, many different and unique people. She'd met a group of men with scraggly hair and instruments strapped to their backs, singing well into the night as they waited for their ride. She'd met young teenagers with hair as wild and untamed as their spirits, hooting as they leapt from car to car, their cameras swinging around their necks. This woman was not like either. She dressed in the way all nomads did, layers of clothes, a giant backpack, but she used a finely carved wooden stick to help herself maintain balance as she navigated the tracks. Her black hair was messily braided over one shoulder, streaks of gray akin to a layer of snow under the early June sun. The companion she had been speaking to trotted just at her feet, a scraggly-looking gray dog, no bigger than a raccoon. But none of that was what caught Amma's attention. The red sash, woven with colors, tied tightly around her waist. Its long strands fluttered along beside her as she drew closer. That was what caught her eye. "Now where are you off to?" The stranger's voice was warm and jovial, her stick thunking against the metal of the tracks. Amma appraised her reluctantly once more, unable to decide if she appreciated being drawn forth from the melancholy of her mind, or if she resented being reminded of the choices at hand. If it had been anyone else, that is to say, anyone who didn't remind her of the older ladies that baked for her neighborhood and always played bingo with a cigarette in hand, the decision would be easy to make. Unalloyed annoyance would have taken flight from deep within her soul. All the pent-up anger and uneasiness that accumulated in her travels would lash out unbidden. Her reply would be colder than any winter she had faced. But looking at the stranger, Amma could clearly see the crow's feet tickling the corners of her eyes, her skin tanned and sun-kissed from what had to be a result of seasons spent within nature. And the decision was made for her. "Dawson's Creek," she said, her voice coming out clipped and brittle. It had been like that for weeks, and truly there was no end in sight. The older woman and her dog looked up at her, undeterred, a wry, knowing smile gracing her face. It was as though this was precisely the answer she was looking for, as though she knew exactly what Amma was going to say, and the satisfaction of being right was almost too much to bear. "Lovely," she exclaimed, leaning heavily on the walking stick. "We're heading in the same direction, then." Perhaps it was the lonely, late-night thoughts that rattled around inside her head during her days of travel to even get here, but Amma found herself comforted, if only slightly. Amma wished she could embrace it further, to fully feel the comforting kinship this elderly woman was offering. It's within arm's reach, but instead there's this sullen bitterness. There's whimsical nature around the stranger. Her posture is at peace, like she might melt into the ground or grow skin wooden like her stick and plant herself right beside the tracks, and she'd be fine with it. She hopes the woman could excuse the childish jealousy Amma feels instead. The envy of being so content you don't want to crawl out of your skin, that you don't find yourself on autopilot, hitchhiking to Armstrong of all places just to catch a train to the West Coast. Not for the thrill of adventure, but because you want to desperately complete the puzzle that is yourself. She feels the stranger's dark brown eyes boring a hole into her cheek. Excited? Amma tensed up at the question, because no. Well, sort of? How can she explain to a stranger the hollowness she feels just below her sternum? It must show on her face, because no pantomiming or clumsy guesswork is needed. The older woman's whimsical expression softens around the edges. There's something gentle there now, laid out across wrinkled skin with concern knit to her brow. It's not easy, is it? The woman states, more than asks, making Amma feel like one of the frogs she dissected in high school. And just like that, Amma found herself back in her great-aunt's home, sitting on the cold floor between the legs of her great-aunt, who worked the knots out of her hair. A heavy brush that tore through the mats from playing outside, but the warm voice of the elderly woman as she distracted her with stories passed down from the generations far before her. She starts, finally meeting the knowing look of the stranger. I can't do this. It's spoken more to herself. The anxious knot crawling under her skin and squeezing her throat is too much. She knows the train will be here in a few minutes. But there's a mortifying cold feeling in the pit of her stomach. Her head too full as her feet force her away from the tracks. She felt helpless in a way she has not sensed since childhood. Long forgotten, but dredged up once more from the very depths of despair. You know, the woman's voice once again breaks through her spiral of thoughts. And once more, Amma doesn't feel annoyed. I'm heading west to visit my second cousin's family. Their son passed. It's not instant, but the shock of the words does Amma surfacing, pausing her walking to properly give the stranger her attention. Her problems seem monstrous. The anxieties she feels are gag-worthy, but she turns back to the woman regardless. Oh, I'm sorry. The words feel clumsy in her mouth, her neck giving a phantom ache from the whiplash. Still, she steps back again, skittish now and acutely aware of the way her heartbeat is in her tonsils. I hope you have The stranger easily cuts her off. A shake of her head sends a dyed black bead falling from my hair, bouncing off the myriad of pebbles at their feet. I've been putting off going for a few years. It's overdue. The woman leans on her cane, and Amma found herself leaning forward too, because yes, overdue. That was how she felt about this trip. But overdue is better than never. Wouldn't you agree? If I never go, I'll be wondering what I missed on my deathbed. It's not healthy to go with regrets. Amma taps the tip of her right boot against the gravel, hardly aware she's following an unheard melody as she watches the woman glance around the tracks. Her dog is at her feet, equally as content, and sure that, yes, this is right. You're not scared they'll reject you? You know, for taking so long. Amma was acutely aware of how different their situations were. This stranger was returning somewhere. Amma herself was sort of returning, in a way. Returning like a lost songbird, trying to remember which way was north, once the snow had melted. Oh yes, the stranger laughed. But that's okay. I'd rather face the rejection than remain in the dark. Touched one of the dangly, beaded white earrings, almost masked by her braid. A muted expression crossed her face. Her eyes distant as she softly tapped the train tracks once more, drawing her dog's attention. What's the worst thing that could happen, eh? Relatives before either of us rest by that town. It's a part of me, so rejection or not, I owe it to them to visit. Her eyes crinkled, vanishing as she smiled over at Amma. There's nothing wrong that can arise from trying to build a connection. Pausing, the stranger cheekily grinned. Well, the worst is getting my ego bruised, but it's a risk I'll take. The overwhelming sounds in her head dampened, and Amma nods, a withheld breath whooshing from her lungs. She had family, alive and passed on in Dawson Creek, and rejection stung. The fear of rejection stinging almost more so, in her opinion. Fear festered like an untreated wound, infecting with anxiety, and hot to the touch with fever. That's it. Amma huffed in disbelief, shaking her own head now. You're fine with rejection? The woman shrugged her shoulders, not missing a beat, as she easily replied, bruises heal. Headstrong and young as she was, Amma wanted to complain. It wasn't that simple. Trying to connect with her and her family's past was not a simple bruise. Rejection would sting far worse. It would scar and ache and... If you're nervous, the stranger drew herself back up to her full height, leaving Amma unsure if the crack was from the gravel underfoot or from her back. I'll accompany you as far as Whitecourt. Oh no, I couldn't ask that of you, Amma started, her hands waving in front of her, trying to disperse the stranger's kindness. Just the idea of having someone join her felt like a burden lifted off her shoulders, though. Someone to keep her from being alone with her thoughts. Someone who could very obviously give her guidance. Nonsense. The stranger spoke like Alma had offended her. Fixing the world is easier when you have people with you. She stood to the dog, grinning right back to the reluctantly relieved look on Alma's face. Tell you what, if you could convince me in that time that you should be scared and not take whatever risk you have in mind, I'll pay for your plane ticket home myself. Alma snorted, rubbing the back of her neck and digging the toe of her boot into the gravel. All right. Fine. I appreciate it. This time the bitterness had faded from her voice, and Alma found herself smiling despite the words of the stranger. Glancing at her phone, Alma took a deep breath. Any minute now, the train would come chugging by, slow enough to safely hop aboard among Kirkland crates and canola carriers. Distracted, she tugged one of her braids that ran down her skull like a helmet, draping it over her shoulder as one would a medal. It wasn't nearly as neat as her great aunt, but I teach you how to properly do your hair, the stranger crowed. Her black coat draped over her shoulders now, one pair of pinned wings. Hey, Alma protested, an unbridled laugh bubbling in her throat. She didn't get the chance to defend her handiwork as a distant horn disrupted the birds in the trees. Heart lurching in her own throat, Alma stumbled after the stranger who was now walking away, dog tucked under her arm. You coming, kid? The stranger called, her sash fluttering like the birds now flying above them. Dawson might not yet be home, and she's still petrified of rejection, of meeting her cousins. The feeling still rubbing her skin raw, but she's not alone. Glancing back in the way she had come, Alma only hesitated briefly before jogging after her companion.
This episode was developed through the Metis and Me program, with the generous support of the Laidlaw Foundation's Indigenous Youth and Community Futures Fund. This episode was hosted by Caitlin Turner. Produced and edited by Samantha Loney. Original music provided by Etienne Beausoleil. Featuring Foley provided by Epidemic Sound. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate it and share with others to help decolonize the airwaves. Merci for listening.